So about a year ago, I made a video called Why Fake Should Have Been an Anime, which was a way for me to talk about a manga that I really liked as a kid, and also just kind of an excuse to explore another video making format, which I actually wanted to do more of as time goes on. My channel doesn't get a lot of views, but that particular video for a one-off, it did really well, and it got me thinking about other types of videos or mangas that I'd want to reread and maybe do a retrospective essay on. And within the past couple of weeks, I rediscovered one of the few series that I read on mangago.me as a child, which was Kusata Kyoshi no Hoteshiki, or in English, Bad Teacher's Equation. I discovered, to my delight, that most of the series had been translated into English and was now readily available for purchase in the US of A. Hooray! Because pirating is bad, and Mangago really screwed up my laptop. I still am struggling to remove adware, and maybe this is why my identity keeps getting stolen. Anyways, the reason why I wanted to reread this series is because that I remember it being really wild. Like, it had a very kind of simple concept or simple story, but somehow got really nuts. And I wanted to see if it was just as crazy as I had remembered it, and folks, it's even crazier. So we're gonna dive right into it, and please prepare yourselves because full spoilers ahead. The story and characters. So, enter our hero, Atsushi Arasawa, a charming and overly intelligent young boy who joins a terrible high school because he desires to find his Ma-chan, or the male babysitter that he had as a child. Right off the bat, we know that Atsushi is gay and deeply, deeply in love with Ma-chan, who he hasn't seen in years since he moved out of the neighborhood. And yeah, he's apparently a freaking genius, like he's a whiz kid, and somehow his parents are totally cool with their promising young child going to what is essentially a terrible school for hoodlums, or as they call it, they keep calling other people Yankees, and I don't know if that means that they're trying, if it's just a bunch of Japanese kids that are trying to be American, or if they're really just trying to say, like, these are punks, like, these are the bad kids. But yeah, the series wants you to believe that pretty much, like, right off the bat. Atsushi has this letter from Ma-chan where he explains that he is a nurse at this high school, so since childhood, Atsushi has been basically conspiring to reunite with him. But when he tries to go to the nurse's office to see if he's there, he runs into a man named Masayoshi, who is the nurse of the school. And while Atsushi remembers Ma-chan as someone who is gentle and kind, Masayoshi is anything but. He's crude, charismatic, a total flirt, and somewhat reckless. Dude's a chain smoker and playboy, and he's totally proud of it. Not only is this man nothing like Ma-chan, but he's not really the type of person that you'd expect to be both a substitute teacher and a high school nurse. But because Atsushi never remembered Ma-chan's real name, he just assumed that Masayoshi is Ma-chan. But we come to find out that Masayoshi and Ma-chan, or Masami, are brothers, and Masami quit his job at being the school nurse to become a children's book illustrator. So yes, another thing that this series wants you to believe right off the bat is that there's two brothers, each with similar sounding names. Not the crazy thing. The crazy thing is that both of them decided to be school nurses, even though one person obviously should not be a school nurse. So Atsushi basically believes that Masayoshi is Ma-chan, and like theoretically, because the brothers are both so, because their names are similar sounding or they begin the same way, they could in theory be called Ma-chan. Except Atsushi has a picture of Masami, and Masami looks nothing like Masayoshi. Okay, they look nothing alike. It's not like they are twins with different hair colors. They have actually different physical features. So Atsushi's apparently blind. I don't know. Like, the way that the series wants to kind of set up this like sort of meet cute twist just falls so flat when you realize that these brothers don't look a goddamn thing alike, and you can tell from looking at this photo that this is not the same man. Like, how does this man's chin and nose and eye shape just change as he grows to an adult. Like Atsushi, like is Atsushi really supposed to be the most intelligent character in this series? Because he's kind of a dumbass, like right from the get-go. Dumbass factor, just on a 10 scale there. And we're also introduced to the other characters in the series. So there's Toru, a teacher at the high school who is best friends with Masayoshi from high school, and he's also dating Masami. He's the character that gets shit on the most for no reason whatsoever. He's frequently used as this punching bag amongst the other characters who often make fun of him and his lack of experience in relationships. Masami and him just started dating, or so it's really kind of implied that they're pretty early in their relationship, because at the start of the series they haven't so much as kissed. And yes, these are grown-ass men in their mid to late 20s who haven't kissed and have been dating for, I don't even know. Again, not very clear. And then you've got Koji Inagaki, who is Atsushi's childhood friend. He's half delinquent, half golden retriever. Koji is desired by many at school for his good looks and his athleticism. Much of the first kind of year in high school is Koji trying to avoid trying his best in athleticism, as all these people just try to get him to join their clubs, and all he really wants to do is get some ass, which, like, good for you, man. Like, 10 out of 10, you know what you want and you going for it. That is what we call dedication. He and Atsushi were separated after Koji's family moved away when they were kids, and upon reuniting in high school, Koji declares his love for Atsushi and makes plans to aggressively pursue him, which he will pursue Atsushi pretty much for the majority of the series until about their last year of high school. And Koji will pursue Atsushi with the help of his middle school friend Yuriko. She's a cute girl with fujoshi antics, but she's also a real one who will do anything to help her friends when they're in a time of need. While she's totally supportive of Koji going after Atsushi, she herself has a crush on Koji, which she tries to eventually realize and come to terms with over the course of the series. So you've got kind of this weird bisexual love triangle in here. And, you know, if this didn't give you an aneurysm trying to understand it, buckle up, because this world is complete and utter f***ing chaos. Shortly after the first chapter, we're told that Masayoshi moonlights as the owner of a gay nightclub, and when one of the kids, I think it's Koji, threatens to tell the school administration about it, he just casually replies, "Oh, they already know." Do they now? Do they? Do they? Sir, why are you a teacher and a school nurse when you own a gay nightclub? I know teachers' wages are terrible, but this is 1990s Japan. What the actual hell is happening here? Oh, it's because it's your dad? Your dead gay dad ran this nightclub and has his equally gay sons? You guys just want to make sure you keep his legacy alive? Wait a minute, the dad isn't dead? He's just living in Norway for some random reason? Wait, the dad chose to open up a gay nightclub and the dad's not even gay? Like, heaven help me. The backstory of the three oldest men, Masayoshi, Masami, and Toru, frequently resurfaces and in all honesty comprises about half of the series' main story, so we learn pretty quickly what had happened to bring the three of them together. Masayoshi and Masami's dad fell in love with a Norwegian woman named Leaf, and after he knocked her up, she returned to her home country while he worked to build a life for her and bring her and the kids back to Japan. He worked a series of part-time jobs while living with an old high school classmate, a drag queen named Mama, who has unrequited feelings for him. Mama is a side character in the series who appears infrequently, but when she shows up, she's there to provide support and advice on love, and deservingly give Masayoshi a ton of shit. Unfortunately, Leif is very sick, and she dies before the father's dream can be realized and before the family can be truly reunited. So he returns home to bring his sons back to Japan, and at which point the boys meet Toru in high school, and that's how the three of them all become close. But the trauma from losing their mother causes the boys to develop... I don't want to say this, I mean I really don't, but it causes Masayoshi to develop a mother complex, and when Masami takes on the housekeeping and the domestic role of their late mother, Masayoshi develops a brother complex. And what I mean by that is that for the beginning of the series, Masayoshi is into his brother. No, I wish I was kidding. I really, genuinely wish I was. But Masayoshi is into Masami and is repeatedly jealous of his relationship with Toru. Masayoshi thinks of Masami as his first love. Like, just to give you an illustration of how intensely, like, Masayoshi takes his feelings and how seriously he takes his own feelings, at one point he gives his brother a hickey as a joke. Man, it's also implied that Masami looks like the boy's dead mother, so Freud is having a fucking field day with this one, folks, and I'm just gonna stop here.
Because how the are you allowed within 100 yards of a school?
Oh my god. Okay, we're gonna keep going. Just stick with me. Just stick with me on this one. It should be noted that although Masayoshi has a thing for his brother and works at a gay nightclub, he also insists that he is not gay and would, in fact, never want to be with a man. As I've mentioned, and as you've probably picked up, Bad Teacher's Equation is very dense and full of backstory. While the intro of the series makes you think that it's all going to be told from Atsushi's perspective, at best it's a series of vignettes and loosely threaded stories about growing up. Atsushi falls out of love with Masami almost instantaneously after discovering that rough around the edges Masayoshi has some very swoon-worthy qualities. He dedicates himself to becoming a man worthy of Masayoshi's affection, which is an arduous task to undergo given how much of a goddamn crybaby he is. Masayoshi tries to unlearn a lot of his bad habits, such as his codependency on his brother Masami and his desperate desire to push away those who get close to him. Koji navigates his changing feelings for Atsushi as Yuriko falls deeper in love with him, and Toru and Masami, the core couple in the series, or at least another core couple in this series, navigate coming out to their families, having sex, and figuring out what a long-term relationship looks like. We follow these characters over the course of 3 years as they get into various shenanigans, whether it's hosting dinner parties at the nightclub, going on trips to Norway, or partying at the beach. The group is there to support and grow together. Art and designs. Now, I don't have much to say about the art other than it's classic 90s fare. You're gonna get the very exaggerated kind of jaw lines and nose structures and small eyes, very designed and stylized eyes, as opposed to what we see a lot of nowadays, which is very big, very colorful eyes that are kind of multidimensional and super detailed. So if you're really a fan of that 90s style, it's quite fantastic. The characters themselves have some great designs in that everyone looks distinctively different from each other. So they all look like they're a part of the same world, but you can tell them apart from one another pretty easily. Kazuma Kodaka, the mangaka, is deeply influenced by the works of Rumiko Takahashi. So for those of you who don't know her, she's pretty much the godmother of manga. She's the creator of Inuyasha. Kodaka is also influenced by that of her mentor, Sanami Mato, who is the creator of Fake. So I understandably got into Kodaka's work after reading Mato's and wanting to kind of read more in that vein. One of the things that Kodaka does masterfully well is actually changing the characters' designs as the characters grow up. A lot of mangas sort of just change a character's hairstyle to indicate that they're getting older, but Kodaka raises the bar by slowly changing the character's physical attributes. Atsushi goes from being a bright-eyed, round-faced boy with a childish haircut to a young man with a strong jaw and more stylish hair. His nose also goes from tiny and cute and kind of cherub-like to more elongated and masculine, so he really grows into his face. And it's really interesting because his transformation from teenager to adult is incredibly believable and distinguished. All of the teenage characters also respectively grow taller, and some of their facial features change as well as they kind of grow into their faces more. And I think that this is a really impactful, refreshing difference from the standard change the hairstyle, increase the height to illustrate growing older, and so it's really cool to witness this change in the art style over time. Themes, tropes, and final thoughts. In the author's notes section of the condensed Volume 5, Kodaka explains that Bad Teacher's Equation became a story which mirrored the history of boys' loves comics throughout the 90s. I suppose that this in part explains why so much of the series is chock full of classic anime tropes, from friends to lovers to age gaps to falling for one's teacher tutor slash mentor figure, to the dreaded yucky incest tropes. Why in the hell were those so popular in the 90s anyways? Like, what the hell was in the water back then? But, regardless, you have to accept that this series is full of tropes, for better or for worse. For as much as these characters need Jesus, I will say that in retrospect, I'm somewhat impressed with how the series navigated Masayoshi and Atsushi's relationship. To Masayoshi's credit, for as many times as Atsushi came onto him, he rejected it and fully recognized how inappropriate the relationship was. He doesn't try to take advantage of him in that regard. Masayoshi even goes as far as to plan entire events and not invite Atsushi to them, simply so that he can avoid his inappropriate schoolboy crush. And that feels like I'm setting the bar so low, folks, and I hate it. I hate it here. But when compared to other yaoi mangas released within the same time period, it's actually worth pointing this out. Many yaoi mangas don't care about the power dynamics in student-teacher relationships or age gaps, they just kind of dive into it head first, which is fine if you understand the difference between fiction and reality, but I personally find it important to point out these issues that arise in those relationship setups within fiction. It's not all fun and games when it comes to dating a, hot older man, as many of us may have believed as teenagers. In real life, age gap relationships can be harmful and unhealthy and tricky because people are at different points in their lives. Now, Masayoshi fully understands this, but it's other people who start to pressure him to open up to Atsushi more and to be kinder to him. So it's the influence of other people that what gradually leads to this relationship becoming more inappropriate and for these two to become more physical with one another. To be clear, they don't do anything before Atsushi graduates from high school, and even then for many years after. They do kiss though quite frequently, and there's like other iffy stuff that happens that you're like, that's not really kosher. But all in all, I thought that the series had a refreshing, more holistic take on this very common trope. Another cool aspect story-wise, for as little sense as it makes, is the inclusion of the gay club, which is called Lush. Funny because in Minneapolis, where I'm from, there is also a gay club called Lush, so maybe it's just destiny that I was to read this series. I don't know. Please ignore me. Anyways, what's cool about Lush is that it gives an insight into LGBT life in 1990s Japan. Drag queens and trans women aren't treated like the butt of a joke or gross as they are in other mangas, but they're given characterization and respect. Notably, the series also explores coming out, which in another rare twist, Masami ends up coming out to their father and introduces Toru to him. For some strange goddamn reason, the man who runs the gay club and has gay friends is apparently horrified at his son being gay, which, sir, have you met your son? And Toru eventually also comes out to his parents later and introduces Masami to his parents, which actually surprisingly goes a lot smoother despite the fact that he is the oldest son in his family. Another thing that the series does well is kind of exploring sort of what it means to be biracial in Japan. Now, certain other mangas throughout the 90s touch base on this in Japan. I'm thinking about Gravitation, for one, where even though Eriyuki, that main character, he's not biracial, he just somehow has very kind of European features and I believe naturally blonde hair, which is kind of ridiculous that they sort of set it up like that. Masayoshi and Masami are both half Norwegian, half Japanese, and they had an upbringing in Norway and then also in Japan, so there's kind of this dualism to their identities that they are struggling to navigate. Masayoshi in particular is kind of upset about the color of his hair, which is a natural blonde color. And when he grows up, he kind of dyes it and re-dyes it over and over again simply because he is so ashamed of kind of that heritage. And he also has kind of these complexities where when he was growing up, he looked a lot like his father, and his grandmother deeply, deeply resented his father because she basically blamed him for getting the daughter pregnant. and that leading to their mother's basically physical downfall. So there's a lot of complexity there that I think is explored with great depth, and it's kind of interesting to see how Masayoshi sort of comes to term and starts to accept that that is a part of his heritage and that he can be proud of it. What also feels dynamic is how the characters clearly go through this series of changes over time. Even though you're led to kind of believe that this is just your standard rom-com, these characters are actually going through some very dramatic changes. Inagaki comes to terms with his bisexuality, and he works through his feelings for both Atsushi and Yuri. Atsushi kind of has to learn what it means to be a man and how to become tougher. Toru and Masami grow in their relationship, and we're not necessarily revisiting the same conflicts over and over again as time goes on. The romances also have this bittersweet edge to them. Atsushi grapples with the fact that Masayoshi rejects him so much, and Koji realizes that the person that he once loved as a child very easily forgot about him. And Koji and Atsushi's relationship, I think, is the one that's going to really pull and tug at those heartstrings, because even though Koji is headstrong and super annoying, it does make you want to cry at times when you see how deeply he cares for Atsushi, who is just never going to return his feelings. The heartbreak isn't instantaneous, but it's prolonged throughout this series, and it doesn't really end until they're just about to graduate high school, and the thing that kind of establishes that Koji is over Atsushi is when he realizes that Atsushi is taller than him. So for some reason, that's kind of the moment where Koji is done and he's kind of snapped out of love, because I think that the changes that they've gone through over high school were just so dramatic that even Koji recognized that he can't hold on to that love, although it clearly hurts him. But at the same time, you get to experience this joy of Yuriko and Koji falling for one another. It's kind of weird, though, because I can't think of another manga where childhood best friends to lovers didn't work out. Specifically childhood best friends to lovers. I can think of like Sarah Celestial Legend, in which the boy best friend doesn't end up with the girl protagonist because she's into the other guy or whatever. But this is one of those ones where the childhood best friends to lovers just don't work out, and so it's interesting to watch that play out as well. This series in general is just super angsty, just dripping with angst. Even Toru and Masami, who have overcome much personal shame to be together and are deeply, deeply and clearly in love, they don't feel secure in their relationship, and that's kind of the point. Everyone is angsty, everyone is insecure, everyone is struggling to define who they are as a person and who they want to be. Even the adults have a lot of growing up to do. Atsushi says at one point, "The starting line is still ahead of us, and none of us can see the finish line." And I find that to be a really poignant description of that will they, won't they phase before a relationship starts, and the entire manga, which essentially focuses on what happens before a relationship starts. There's this idea that you have to first make it to the starting line. For Koji, Masayoshi, and Atsushi, they are just trying to make it to the starting line. And as for Toru and Masami, well, they're smack dab right on it. Is this series rough around the edges? Oh hell yes, but it is Kodaka's first foray into the BL genre, so I feel like we can somewhat excuse its roughness. She would also later go on to create phenomenal work such as Kizuna Bonds of Love, another long-running and highly influential BL series. All in all, I actually would recommend reading this series, particularly if you're a fan of 90s manga. This is a classic in the BL and yaoi genres, so it's worth checking out for that reason alone. Now, while I was able to find the entire series, I'm now realizing after writing the script that actually it's still really hard to find, and I was quite lucky to get it in the collected set that I did. You can at least get the first 2 volumes pretty easily through Right Stuff Anime. For volumes 3 through 5, you'll likely want to check out third-party vendors through Amazon. If anyone else knows where you can read it digitally without downloading adware or malware, definitely feel free to let others know in the comment section down below. Thank you all so much for watching. I really hope that you liked this video. If you did, please leave a like because it really does help the channel out. Also consider subscribing, and when you subscribe, be sure to hit the notifications bell so you get updates on when I upload future episodes. Without further ado, thank you all so much for watching. Bye! I'd like to give a very special shout out and thanks to the following patrons: Deep Dive Dylan, D. Roberts, Brian White, Caleb Putnam, Robin Harper, Bob Conway, Cody Webb, and Maticus Sama. Thank you all so much.